Imagine sewing patches on your son's jeans, putting him through grad school, then finding out you were too frumpy to be invited to his wedding. That's what Greg and his wife Ashley did to me. But they underestimated a quiet, small-town widow with a paper trail, and I showed up at their country club party with more than champagne. I'm Ellen Marshall, 64 years old, retired teacher, widow, mother, and up until a few months ago, I would have sworn on a stack of Bibles that loyalty, real loyalty, ran deep in our family. Well, life has a way of peeling your blinders off, don't it? I was sitting at my little kitchen table, same one Greg used to do his homework at, when the text came through. Ashley, Greg's fiancée. Nothing warm, no, "Hey Ellen," or even, "Hope you're doing well." Just this, "Hey, just wanted you to know we kept the wedding small. Best for everyone. Hope you understand." No date, no invite, no mother-son dance, not even a God-blessed seat in the back row. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, a prank. My hands trembled so bad, I nearly dropped my phone into my cup of black coffee. But then, like a slap right across the face, it hit me. They'd gotten married without me. Without me. The woman who sewed patches on Greg's jeans when he tore them up sliding into home plate. The woman who sat through every PTA meeting and science fair and half-baked high school play. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table until my knuckles went white. The quiet of the house roared in my ears. Did they really think I'd stay silent? My heart cracked wide open right there in that sunlit kitchen, but I didn't let a sound slip out. Not yet. I wiped my hands on my jeans, picked up my phone, and stared at the little blinking cursor where a reply would go. I thought about texting something back, something sharp, something they'd remember, but instead, I just set the phone down. I looked around my kitchen. The ivy plant I'd kept alive for 20 years sagged a little from thirst. The old calendar still showed July, even though it was creeping well into August now. I guess when you spend so much time waiting for calls that don't come, you stop flipping pages. It wasn't just the text, either. Oh no. Pat, my best friend since we were both 22 and fearless, had called me later that afternoon. "You see Facebook yet, Elle?" she'd said, her voice tight like she was bracing for a blow. I hadn't. I hardly ever looked. But when I logged in, there it was. Picture after picture of Greg and Ashley in some gaudy country club wedding, all glass chandeliers and silk roses, Ashley's parents beaming like they owned the place. Greg looking polished and proud. No sign of me, not even a whisper. My anger simmered. And then, Pat being Pat, she couldn't keep the whole ugly truth to herself. "I wasn't going to tell you this," she said, sighing. "But, Ashley? She called you frumpy, said you'd clash with their brand." Greg didn't say a word to stop her. I pressed my palm flat to the table. The wood felt cool under my hand, steadying. Frumpy. Bad for their brand. My boy, the one I gave everything to, had stood there and let them drag me like I was some stain on their perfect white linens. And it wasn't just the wedding. Oh, it ran deeper than that. That house they lived in, the shiny new townhouse they loved to post about, I paid for it. $40,000 from my late husband's life insurance. Money that should have gone to my retirement or my health. And Greg's MBA degree? That piece of paper he framed like a badge of honor? Paid for every last cent of it, too. No prenup, no thank you, no acknowledgement at all. I rocked back in my chair, staring out the kitchen window at the birdbath Greg had made with me one summer when he was 8. We'd painted it together, him in a little red ball cap, me laughing as he slopped blue paint all over my arms. What had happened to that boy? A sharp wind rattled the window panes, and I flinched. Like even the house couldn't bear the weight of it all. Still, I stayed quiet, at least for now, because the thing about being underestimated, it's like kindling stacked under a dry old tree. All it takes is one spark, and Lord help the fool who strikes the match. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The days after that text felt like walking through a fog. I'd go to pour myself a cup of coffee and forget what I was doing halfway through. I'd hear a car outside and look up, half hoping Greg would be standing there like none of it ever happened. But no one came. Not a call, not a visit. Pat dropped by one afternoon with a casserole and that tight look on her face she always got when she had bad news. We sat out on the porch, the September air turning cool enough that I had to pull my sweater tight around me. "I heard something else," Pat said, barely above a whisper. "From Marie Grant." Marie was Greg's godmother, a woman who still wore lavender perfume and told the blunt truth whether you liked it or not. If Marie said it, you could bet your last dollar it was real. Pat twisted the hem of her shirt. "Ashley's been telling people she and Greg decided you were too small town for the life they're building. Too small town." The words felt like tiny needles, each one pricking a little deeper under my skin. Small town was the way I made birthday cakes from scratch when all the other moms bought theirs from Kroger. Small town was the way I sat through freezing soccer games, wrapped in a ratty old quilt, cheering for Greg even when he sat on the bench the whole season. Small town was love, was loyalty, and now it was a liability. I stared out across my patchy little front yard, the same yard Greg used to tear across with a plastic sword, slaying imaginary dragons. Had all those years meant so little? My chest burned with it, the kind of hurt that doesn't shout. It just sits inside you, cold and heavy, like a stone sinking in water. I tried calling Greg that evening, just to hear his voice, just to see if maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to pull him back from whatever pit Ashley had thrown him into. He didn't pick up. Straight to voicemail. Twice. 3 times. The third time, my fingers shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I left a message, my voice trembling. "Hi, honey. It's Mom. Just calling to say I love you. Call me back when you can, okay?" I hung up, hating myself a little for how small I sounded. Later that night, I pulled up Facebook again. Ashley had posted another photo. Her and Greg at some swanky restaurant downtown, grinning under chandeliers. The caption read, "Cheers to the next chapter with my forever person ring #blessed #power couple." No mention of family. No mention of gratitude. And when I tried clicking on Greg's profile, a message popped up. "You are blocked." I stared at the screen. Breath caught in my throat. Blocked. By my own son. It wasn't just a door slammed shut. It was the locks changed, the windows boarded up. I was erased, like I never mattered. I dropped the phone onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. No sobs, no tears. Just that awful hollow ache that settles into your bones when you realize you've been left behind. And it was deliberate. For a while I sat there, in the dark, the house so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. And I thought about all the things I'd given up. The nights grading papers until 2 in the morning, just so Greg could have new cleats for baseball. The summers I worked tutoring sessions instead of taking vacations so he could afford those private college prep classes. I thought about the $40,000 check I'd written for that starter home, the one they bragged about at every party, the one that made them look so successful. And a sour little thought crept into my mind, curling like smoke. Whose name is on that house, Ellen? The realization hit me like a slap. I didn't know. Greg had promised to take care of all the paperwork. Said it would be easier to just put it in both names until after the wedding. Had I signed it over without thinking? The pit in my stomach deepened. I grabbed the big accordion folder from the desk drawer, the one where I kept every important document since my husband Tom had passed. Birth certificates, insurance policies, mortgage records. I dug through it, my hands frantic, heart pounding. But the title transfer papers for the townhouse? Nowhere to be found. Just the original sale paperwork, listing me, Ellen Marshall, as the owner. Not Greg, not Ashley, me. I sank back against the couch cushions, the file slipping from my lap onto the floor. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something sparked inside me. Not anger, not grief. Power. The house was still legally mine. Every stick of furniture, Every trendy backsplash tile Ashley loved to show off on Instagram, it all belonged to me. And suddenly, I saw it clear as day. If they thought they could cut me out of their lives like I was some inconvenience, well, they hadn't even begun to pay the price. The next morning, I stood in my kitchen, sunlight pouring across the linoleum floor, sipping a cup of coffee that tasted sharper than usual. Not bitter. No, this was something else. Determination. I slid the townhouse paperwork back into the accordion folder, pressed it flat, and tucked it deep into the hall closet. Out of sight. For now. Because the thing about a good hand in poker, you don't slam your cards on the table too soon. You wait. You watch. You smile like you're holding nothing but a busted flush. And you let them bet the farm. I needed more information before I made a move. And when in doubt, you call the one person who always knew where the bones were buried. Pat. I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. You okay?" she asked, her voice tight. "No," I said plainly. "But I'm about to be." There was a beat of silence, and then Pat let out a low whistle. "I'll be there in 10. She arrived in 7. Pat never did like to waste time once she smelled blood in the water. We sat at my kitchen table, a plate of day-old cinnamon rolls between us, flipping through documents, property records, bank statements, copies of tuition invoices I'd paid off one by one. At one point, Pat looked up, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. She said slowly, "You realize Greg lied about that down payment, right?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" Pat tapped a bank statement with her chewed-up pen. "See here? The $40,000 you gave him? He told you it was to cover closing costs and a bank shortfall, right?" I nodded, a sick feeling already blooming in my gut. Pat jabbed at another line. "But look, Greg deposited that money into a joint account with Ashley 3 weeks before the closing date. Then he pulled out $15,000 for, get this," she squinted, "an engagement party and personal expenses." My throat tightened. He hadn't needed the money for the house. He needed it to look like a big man in front of Ashley's family. My anger simmered, slow and heavy, the kind that doesn't flash hot but burns deep, like a coal buried under ash. "And it gets better," Pat said, flipping to another printout. This time it was a loan application. Greg had claimed Ashley's father, Derek Taylor, was helping them with a matching gift, but only if Greg could prove he had enough family backing. In plain English, he used my money as a prop, as leverage to impress a family that thought I wasn't even good enough to be seen. I pressed my hand flat against the table to steady myself. And then, just when I thought the pit couldn't get any deeper, Pat dropped the final bombshell. "Marie told me something else," she said, her voice softer now. "At the rehearsal dinner? Ashley's folks, they made a big deal about how elevated Greg's life was going to be now. Bragged about how Greg came from humble beginnings but knew how to move up." Pat hesitated, looking at me with the sadness I hadn't seen in her eyes since Tom passed. "And Greg went along with it. He told them you were just, a quiet woman, that it was better if you stayed private." I sat there, feeling the old floorboards under my feet, the way the evening sun slanted across the kitchen walls, the faint tick of the clock over the fridge. Private. Invisible. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was an embarrassment. The realization hollowed me out like a cold wind stripping the leaves off a tree. And yet, somewhere underneath the ache, a steel thread wound itself tighter inside me. Let them think I was small town. Let them think I was frumpy, invisible, erased. They didn't know the half of what I was capable of. I stood up, slow and steady, and pulled my sweater tighter across my shoulders. "Pat," I said quietly, "I'm gonna need a nice dress. Something classy." Pat's eyebrows shot up. "Oh Lord," she breathed, a grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. "What are you planning?" I smiled. A thin, fierce smile that made even me a little nervous. "I'm going to their next party," I said, "and I'm bringing the truth with me." Pat clapped her hands together like she was at a 4th of July fireworks show. "You want backup?" she asked. I shook my head. No, honey, this one's mine to finish. And just like that, the plan began to form. Not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of something stronger. Justice. They thought they could cut me out and feast on the spoils. They forgot one thing. You don't bury the roots and expect the tree to bloom. The party was exactly 1 week later. A post-wedding celebration, Ashley's invitation had called it, sent out on social media like a little glittering missile. Not to me, of course. But Pat's niece, a sweet thing with a loose tongue, forwarded it to Pat, and Pat forwarded it to me with just 3 words. Game. On. L. The event was at Ashley's parents' country club. White pillars, valet parking, that kind of place where the grass looks fake and the smiles are even faker. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that afternoon, smoothing the soft blue fabric of the new dress Pat helped me pick out. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate, simple elegance, quiet strength. I pinned Tom's old wedding band to the inside lining, close enough to feel it against my ribs like armor, and slipped my mother's silver locket around my neck. The locket was empty now, but I didn't need a picture to remember who I was. When I stepped into the club lobby, the scent of polished wood and expensive cologne hit me all at once. Heads turned. Not because I was flashy, but because I belonged. I walked past the valet boys, past the nervous young staffers clutching trays of champagne. I walked like I wasn't afraid of a damn thing. Because I wasn't. I spotted them through the archway. Greg, Ashley, Derek Taylor, all puffed up in his tailored suit, holding court like he owned the air around him. Greg was laughing at something, his head thrown back. His fake, look how well I fit in, laugh. And for a second, just a second, I saw my boy at age 6, giggling in the bathtub, blowing bubbles with a plastic wand. The grief hit so fast it nearly doubled me over. But I stood straight, because this moment wasn't about mourning, it was about resurrection. I made my way to the check-in table. Some poor young woman with a clipboard blinked at me. Name, please. I smiled gently. No need to be cruel to the help. Mrs. Ellen Marshall, I said. Mother of the groom. She stammered something about the guest list, but by then, I was already walking past her, my heels clicking steady on the marble floor. No one stopped me. Because people like Ashley and Derek built their whole lives on appearances, and I looked like the kind of woman you didn't embarrass in public. I grabbed a champagne flute off a tray and sipped, steadying my breath, feeling the cool bubble against my tongue. Then, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Ashley saw me first. She froze, mid-laugh, her hand still fluttering toward a waiter like she was summoning a lapdog. Her eyes darted to Greg. Greg turned, and his face drained of color so fast, I thought he might faint. He didn't move toward me, didn't smile. He just stood there like a deer in the crosshairs. Good. Let him feel it. I made my way across the room, weaving through clusters of people, past the floral centerpieces and glittering buffet tables. When I reached them, the music seemed to dim, the chatter dulled, like the whole room leaned in. Ashley plastered on a smile so fake, it was a wonder it didn't crack right off her face. Ellen, she chirped. We didn't expect you. I returned her smile, just as sweet. I bet you didn't, dear. Greg opened his mouth, probably to stammer some excuse, but I cut him off, my voice calm, measured. I just wanted to congratulate you both, I said, raising my glass. And, I added lightly, pulling a slim folder from my handbag, to make sure we tie up a few loose ends. I handed the folder to Greg, who took it like it might explode. He flipped it open, and the color drained from his face even further. Inside were 3 things. A copy of the townhouse deed, still in my name. A formal notice revoking the gift of the property, citing breach of trust. An invoice listing every penny of his MBA tuition, due immediately, with a payment plan attached. Ashley peered over his shoulder, and when she saw the papers, her mouth dropped open. You can't do this, she hissed, her voice breaking through the hum of party noise. I smiled wider. I already have, sweetheart. Greg's hands shook so badly the papers slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. People were staring now. Whispers buzzed like hornets. Derek Taylor stormed over, his face purple. "What's the meaning of this?" he barked. I turned to him, serene as a pond at dawn. "The meaning, Mr. Taylor," I said, letting my voice carry just enough, "is that appearances can be deceiving. And not everything belongs to who you think it does." I saw Marie Grant, standing near the punch bowl, smirking into her glass. Good old Marie. Ashley's voice rose, shrill and ugly. "You're ruining everything!" I tilted my head slightly, letting the silence settle before I answered. "No, dear. You ruined it," I said, my voice low and cutting. "The day you erased your husband's mother." The crowd rippled with murmurs. I set my empty champagne glass on a passing tray, turned on my heel and walked out. Not a single person tried to stop me. Because I wasn't the frumpy, invisible woman they thought they could shove aside. I was a storm wrapped in satin. And they hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The funny thing about setting a fire like that, you don't always hear the crackle right away. Sometimes you just feel the shift, the way the air changes when a storm's rolling in. I went home that night, kicked off my heels by the front door, and made myself a grilled cheese sandwich like I used to when Greg was little, and the world felt safe. I ate it standing up in the kitchen. The clock ticked. The house breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't sitting around waiting for someone to call, to visit, to need me. Nope. I was just here, on my own 2 feet. And it felt damn good. The next morning, the fallout began. Pat called before sunrise, her voice breathless with excitement. "Elle, honey, you won't believe it." Words spreading like wildfire. Derek Taylor's furious. He's threatening to cut Ashley off completely. Says he won't be, quote, financially associated with scandal. I sat down at the kitchen table, my tea steaming in my hand. "Good," I said simply. Pat giggled like a teenager. "You should have seen Ashley's face after you left, like someone had swapped her champagne for vinegar." I smiled to myself. Let them scramble. Let them try to sweep the pieces under their fancy rugs. You reap what you sow. Still, part of me, a small, stubborn part, hoped Greg would call. Maybe apologize. Maybe try to patch things up. But days passed. Silence. I cleaned out my garden, yanked up the weeds that had strangled my tomato plants. I sat on the porch swing in the evenings, a quilt over my lap, watching the seasons turn without rushing them. And life settled into something steady, something solid, until the envelope arrived. No return address, just my name, scrawled in Greg's boyish handwriting. My heart gave a painful little leap, betraying me. I brought it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long minute. Then, with a steady hand, I slid my letter opener along the edge. Inside was a note. Not long, not emotional. "Mom, we're moving out. You'll get the keys back next week. Do what you want with the place. We don't need it anymore. Greg." No apology, no explanation, just a cold resignation, like he was tossing a used napkin onto the curb. I sat back, the letter drifting onto the table. And just like that, whatever last thread I'd been clinging to, snapped. He was gone. The boy I'd rocked to sleep after nightmares, the teenager I'd driven across 3 states to visit on college weekends, the young man I'd sacrificed everything for, gone. And there wasn't a thing I could do to bring him back. I pressed my palm flat against the cool wood of the table, grounding myself. There's a special kind of grief when you lose someone who's still living. No funeral, no casseroles, just an ache that settles into your bones, sharp and silent. But I'd already learned something about pain. If you sit with it long enough, it stops being the thing that defines you. It just becomes part of the landscape. Something you carry, but no longer answer to. I folded the note, slid it into a drawer, and went about my day. The next week, the townhouse keys arrived by courier. A single key ring in a padded envelope. No note this time. I slipped the keys into my purse and called Marie. "You up for a little road trip?" I asked. Marie didn't even hesitate. "Where we headed, Elle?" I smiled. Time to see what's left of Greg's little kingdom. 2 days later, Marie and I pulled up to the townhouse in her battered Buick, the engine rattling like a tin can full of pennies. The place looked different now. The flower beds were wilted. The shutters hung crooked. There was a crack in the front steps, signs of a life unraveling. We stepped inside. The furniture was gone. Just a few dusty outlines on the carpet where couches and tables used to sit. The walls were bare, except for a few bent nails and scuff marks. In the kitchen, a pile of unopened bills sat on the counter, heavy with late notices. Marie wandered through the living room, whistling low. "They left this place in worse shape than a busted piñata," she muttered. I ran my fingers along the chipped edge of the kitchen island. Ashley had once bragged about how elevated it was. Now it just looked hollow, like their whole life together had been a stage set built on borrowed money and borrowed pride. Marie crossed her arms. "So what now?" I turned, feeling the weight of the empty house pressing in. "I sell it," I said simply. "Cut the last tie." Marie nodded, her mouth set in a grim little smile. "Damn right you do." We stood there a moment longer, the autumn sun slanting through the grimy windows, lighting up the dust in the air like gold. And for the first time since Greg's betrayal, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel broken. I just felt free. It took a few weeks to clean up the mess Greg and Ashley left behind. Marie helped when she could, and Pat came by with buckets, mops, and a whole lot of righteous indignation. "Look at this," Pat hollered one afternoon, brandishing a broken lampshade like a weapon. "No respect." "None," I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes the only thing standing between you and bitterness is a good belly laugh with someone who's been through it too. We patched holes, scrubbed floors, and peeled Ashley's tacky faux marble contact paper off the kitchen counters. A job that deserved hazard pay, if you ask me. By the time we were done, the townhouse wasn't fancy, but it was clean. Honest. And honest was more than enough for me these days. I listed it with a local realtor, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, who wore steel-toed boots under her pencil skirts. Carla walked through the place, nodding approvingly. "This'll move fast," she said. "Good bones. And the market's hot right now." Within a week, there were 3 offers, all above asking. I accepted the highest bid without hesitation. Cash buyer. Quick closing. I signed the paperwork at Carla's office, my hand steady, my heart strangely light. And when the check cleared into my account, I sat on my porch swing with a glass of iced tea, listening to the creak of the old chains and the rustle of the dry autumn leaves. It wasn't just money, it was a full circle moment. I had poured so much into Greg's future, so much time, money, dreams. And now, finally, something was coming back to me. Maybe not the way I wanted, maybe not through love, but through survival. And survival, I was starting to realize, was its own kind of victory. About a month after the sale, I got a call from Marie. "You sitting down?" she asked, her voice bubbling with barely contained glee. I grinned, curling deeper into my armchair. "Depends. This good news or bad?" "That depends on how much you like karma," she said. Turned out the gossip mill had been churning over time. Ashley's family had pulled back hard after the party scandal, cutting off financial support, canceling the country club membership, even freezing the trust fund they were dangling for future grandchildren. Without that safety net, Greg and Ashley had been forced to sell off what little they had left. The new car? Gone. The designer handbags Ashley used to parade around? Listed on secondhand sites. Their whole power couple image crumbling like a cheap wedding cake left out in the rain. Marie was cackling by the time she finished telling me. "You should see the pitying looks they're getting around town," she said. "Ashley's stuck working part-time at that fancy boutique, and Greg's doing temp gigs. Last I heard, he's bussing tables over at that steakhouse on Route 6. I closed my eyes, letting the news wash over me. Did it make me happy? No, but it made me resolved, because for the first time they were facing the consequences of their choices, not cushioned by my sacrifices, not bailed out by my blind love. They were standing in the wreckage they created, and I was standing in the clear, One afternoon, a few weeks later, Pat and I were poking around the little antique shops downtown, something we hadn't done in years. We were laughing over a particularly hideous ceramic rooster when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, it's Greg. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. Pat peered over my shoulder. "You gonna answer that?" I shook my head slowly. "Not here," I said. We finished browsing, bought ourselves matching hand-painted mugs, and sat down for coffee at the corner cafe. When I finally answered Greg's text, I kept it short. "I'm available Saturday at noon. At my house." He didn't argue, didn't beg, just sent back, "See you then." Saturday came cold and bright. I put on a soft sweater, pulled my hair back into a no-nonsense bun, and set a second cup of coffee on the table across from mine. At exactly noon, there was a knock. I opened the door, and there he was, Greg. Older, thinner, lines carved around his mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. He looked at me like a man who didn't know whether to step forward or turn and run. I stepped aside, wordless, and let him in. He sat down at the table, cradling the coffee cup in both hands, like it might shatter if he wasn't careful. For a moment, the only sound was the tick of the kitchen clock. Finally, Greg cleared his throat. "I messed up," he said. I said nothing. He looked down at his coffee, shame rolling off him in waves. I let myself treat you like you were nothing. And you're not. You never were. I still said nothing. Because this wasn't about making me feel better. This was about him facing himself. Greg fumbled in his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote you something," he said. "It's not much, but I didn't know where to start." I took the paper, held it lightly, didn't open it. "Why now?" I asked, my voice even. Greg winced. "Because," he said, "when everything fell apart, when Ashley's family turned their backs, when my so-called friends stopped answering my calls, there was no one left." His eyes shimmered, and I realized the only person I threw away was the only person who ever really stood by me. I sat there a long minute, Greg's crumpled note soft between my fingers, the words he'd just spilled hanging heavy in the air. Once upon a time, hearing him say all that would have cracked me open with hope. Not now. Now, it just settled into the quiet place inside me that had learned the difference between words and change. Greg watched me with that old, pleading look, the one he used when he wanted a second chance after skipping curfew or wrecking his bike. Only this time, he wasn't 17. He was a grown man sitting in the wreckage of his own choices. I set the note down, untouched. "You didn't just hurt me, Greg," I said, my voice steady. "You humiliated me. You erased me." His shoulders sagged and he scrubbed a hand over his face. "I know, Mom, I know. And I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the shining boy from the Little League photos, wasn't the proud college grad holding up his diploma. He was just a man now. A man who had fallen hard, and hard truths were etched into every line of his face. "Being sorry doesn't rebuild a bridge you burn to the ground," I said quietly. He flinched. "Good. Let him feel it. You didn't just go along with Ashley," I continued. "You blocked my number. You shut me out like I was some shame you needed to hide." Greg opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. "Not yet." I needed to say it all. For me. "You stood there, while they laughed at me behind my back. You let them treat me like I was disposable, after everything I gave up for you. And when it suited you, you tossed me aside for people who cared more about appearances than they ever would about you." A tear slipped down his cheek, and he swiped at it angrily. "I was stupid," he muttered. I thought if I just fit into their world, it'd fix everything. Make me enough." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Enough for who, Greg? Them? Or yourself?" He didn't answer. Maybe because he didn't know. Maybe because deep down, he understood how hollow that chase had been all along. The kitchen clock ticked on, steady, patient. "I'm not here to punish you," I said finally. "I'm not here to scream or throw things or demand you grovel." Greg looked up, startled. I met his eyes. "But I am here to tell you, things are different now." He nodded slowly, cautiously. "Anything. Whatever you want, Mom." I almost smiled at that. Almost. "First," I said, "I'm not your bank. I'm not your safety net. I'm not here to fix what you broke." Greg swallowed hard, but he didn't interrupt. "You're a grown man," I said. "You figure out your own messes, your own bills, your own future." He nodded again, shame written all over him. "Second," I continued, "you don't just get to stroll back into my life like nothing happened. Trust isn't a light switch you flip on when it's convenient." Tears brimmed again, but he blinked them back. "I'll earn it," he said hoarsely. "I swear to you, Mom, I'll earn it." I believed that he believed it. Right now, sitting there in his regret. But I also knew regret has a way of fading when the hard work of redemption starts. So I just nodded, slow and even. "We'll see," I said. One step at a time. Greg reached across the table, tentative, like a man reaching for a fragile bird. I let him take my hand. Just for a moment. His grip was warm, shaking slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. I didn't say, "You're welcome." I didn't say I love you too. Some bridges stay broken, even when you build new ones beside them. Instead, I squeezed his hand once, firm, final, and then I let go. Greg stayed maybe 20 more minutes. We talked about small things. The weather. The old oak tree out back that was leaning too much to one side. Nothing big. Nothing heavy. And when he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "I don't deserve another chance," he said. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him clearly. Not my perfect boy. Not my shattered disappointment. Just a man. Flawed. Trying. "You'll have to build it, Greg," I said gently. "Brick by brick. On your own." He nodded, wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, and walked out into the cold afternoon light. I closed the door behind him, turned the deadbolt with a soft click, and leaned my forehead against the wood for a long moment. Outside, the wind rattled the dry branches of the maple trees. Inside, the house settled around me, solid and steady. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was free. Free to choose what parts of my past I carried forward, and what parts one left, finally, blessedly, behind. The first Saturday after Greg's visit, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, striping the quilt in wide golden bars. For the first time in I couldn't tell you how long, I didn't reach for my phone, didn't check for texts that weren't coming, didn't brace myself for the next shoe to drop. I just lay there for a moment, soaking in the quiet. Funny, isn't it? When you finally stop waiting on someone else's love, your own company starts to feel like a blessing instead of a punishment. I got up, pulled on my old jeans, the ones paint-stained from 100 afternoons, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The kettle whistled low. The radio crackled with some easy blues song. The house smelled like cinnamon and dust and possibility. After breakfast, I grabbed a spiral notebook from the junk drawer, one of those cheap ones you buy during back-to-school sales and forget about. On the front, in big letters, I wrote Ellen's new life list, and I meant it. Not a bucket list, not a revenge list, not a desperate clinging to what was lost, just a gentle blueprint for whatever the good Lord had left in store for me. I sat down with my coffee and thought hard before writing the first item. 1. Go somewhere I've never been. Not just the next town over. Not just another Sunday drive. Somewhere real. Somewhere mine. I tapped the pen against my lip, thinking, where did a 64-year-old woman with a worn heart and a strong back want to go? Then, it came to me, as clear as if Tom had whispered it in my ear from wherever he was now. Savannah. I'd always dreamed of it. The moss-draped oaks, the slow river, the old haunted houses with their peeling shutters and stubborn beauty. Tom and I used to talk about it back when money was tight and time even tighter. Someday, we said. Always someday. Well, someday was now. I smiled, a small thing but real, and wrote underneath, 2. Take the train to Savannah. Old-fashioned. Slow. Time to think. Time to breathe. Next, I scribbled, 3. Paint again. Just for me. I hadn't picked up a brush since before Greg's wedding disaster. Somewhere along the way, between the heartbreak and the waiting, the colors had bled right out of me, but they were still there. I could feel them stirring. Maybe not for sale, maybe not even good, but real. 4. Laugh until my sides hurt. That one made me smile too. I didn't know how, or where, or with whom, but I was gonna laugh again. Not polite chuckles at someone else's jokes. Big, messy, can't catch your breath laughter. The kind that shakes the dust off your soul. I sat back, rereading my little list, a warmth blooming in my chest. It wasn't much. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. The next day, I went down to the train station and bought myself a ticket. One way. The woman at the counter, a grandmotherly type with a silver bun and cat-eye glasses, smiled when she handed it over. Going on an adventure? She asked. I tucked the ticket into my wallet and nodded. Something like that, she winked. Best kind. I left the station with a light step, the winter air crisp against my cheeks. And when I passed the travel agency window, with all those glossy posters of beaches and castles and mountains, I didn't feel that old ache of missing out. I didn't want someone else's dream. I wanted mine. The night before I left, I packed a small bag, a few clothes, my favorite book, a battered sketch pad, and Tom's wedding band, still pinned to the inside of my jacket, right where it belonged. I stood at the threshold of my front door, looking around my little house, the ivy plant on the windowsill, reaching stubbornly toward the light, the dented coffee table Greg built me in high school shop class, the framed picture of me and Pat at the county fair, laughing like fools in the rain. It wasn't much, but it was enough. More than enough. I locked the door, tucked the key into my pocket, and stepped out into the dark, chilly morning. The stars above looked like someone had shaken a handful of diamonds across black velvet, and I smiled, because for the first time in a long while, the road ahead didn't scare me. It didn't feel empty. It felt wide open. Mine. The train rumbled out of the station, just as the sun was pulling itself over the horizon, stretching long, gold fingers across the fields. I settled into my window seat, a worn leather satchel tucked at my feet, my battered sketch pad balanced on my knees. Outside, the world rolled by in soft blurs, bare trees, sleepy towns, rusty fences bending under the weight of time. I watched it all, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, feeling the miles peel away the layers I didn't need anymore. The guilt, the regret, the endless wondering what more I could have done. I wasn't running from anything. I was running to something. There's a difference, you know. Around noon, somewhere past the Carolina line, a woman slid into the seat across from me. She looked about my age, maybe a little older, with silver hair cut into a sharp, stylish bob, and a bright red scarf knotted around her throat. She gave me a polite smile and cracked open a thick mystery novel. For a while, we rode in companionable silence, the kind that doesn't press or prod. I liked that. After a few miles, the woman set her book down and glanced over. "First time heading south?" she asked, her voice warm, a little raspy. I smiled. "First time heading anywhere in a long while." She laughed, a throaty, genuine sound. "Well, you picked a good direction. Folks down there know how to slow down and breathe." I nodded, staring out the window again. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I said softly. She extended a hand. "Name's June. June Caldwell." I shook it. "Ellen Marshall." "Nice to meet you, Ellen," she said. "You running from trouble?" Or running toward peace? I chuckled. A little of both, maybe. June winked. Best kind of trip. We talked off and on for the rest of the ride. Nothing too heavy. Favorite books, terrible dates, how the world's gotten so fast. People forgot how to linger over a second cup of coffee. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't ask about hers. It felt easy, rare. By the time the train pulled into Savannah's weathered little station, the sun was sinking into a thick peach-colored sky. June stood, slinging her tote bag over her shoulder. If you ever want company wandering those old squares, she said, I'm staying at the Willow Inn off River Street, room 203. I tucked the name away like a seed in my pocket. Thank you, I said sincerely. She winked again and disappeared into the crowd. Savannah smelled like salt and moss and the faint trace of wood smoke. The air was thick and soft, the kind that wrapped itself around you without asking. I walked from the station to my little rented room, a creaky second-floor place above a bakery that smelled of yeast and cinnamon. No chandeliers, no silk sheets, just clean linen, a cracked window looking out over a cobbled alley, and the steady heartbeat of the city below. I set my bag down and stood by the window for a long time, listening to the sounds of this new life breathing around me. A man laughing down the street. A dog barking lazily in the courtyard. The distant rumble of riverboats pulling out toward the horizon. It wasn't grand. It wasn't glamorous. But it was alive. And so was I. The next morning, I bought a paper map at a corner shop, refusing to use my phone's GPS out of pure stubbornness, and set out to wander. I strolled through shady squares framed by giant oaks dripping with Spanish moss, past weathered brick mansions with iron railings that twisted like vines. I sipped sweet tea on a crooked bench, fed pigeons with the crumbs from a warm buttered biscuit, sketched a crumbling fountain in my notebook, my hand unsteady but eager. Nobody knew me here. Nobody expected anything of me. I could have been anyone. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. It thrilled me. Later that afternoon, on a whim, I wandered into an art gallery tucked between a used bookstore and an old tavern. The place smelled of oil paint and linseed. The walls hung with bright, messy, wonderful canvases. A woman about my age sat behind the counter, flipping through a catalog. She looked up and smiled. Welcome, she said. Take your time. I wandered slowly, studying each piece. None of them were perfect. The colors ran over the lines. The proportions skewed. Some of the frames were chipped. But God, they were alive. The kind of art that didn't apologize for what it was, or what it wasn't. I found myself in front of a small painting, tucked in the back. Just a porch swing. An old maple tree shedding golden leaves. A slant of late afternoon sun. Simple. Ordinary. But my throat tightened anyway. Because it looked like home. Like my home. The woman behind the counter must have seen something in my face. First time here, she asked, coming over? I nodded. It's beautiful, I said, voice thick. She smiled warmly. You know, she said, we offer beginners workshops on Saturdays. No pressure, just paint, coffee, and good company. I opened my mouth to make some excuse. Too old, too rusty, too something. But then I thought of my list, of the promise I made to myself, to paint again, just for me. I smiled. I'd love that, I said. And I meant it. Every word. Saturday rolled around faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror in my little rented room, smoothing down my soft blue cardigan, my palms slick with nerves. You'd think I was about to walk into a board meeting, not an art workshop. It's just a painting class, Ellen. I muttered to myself, trying to breathe past the tightness in my chest. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the class. It was about putting a piece of myself out there again. No armor, no distractions, just me and whatever spilled out onto the canvas. I slipped Tom's ring into my pocket for courage and headed down the winding streets toward the gallery. The door chimed as I pushed it open, the smell of fresh coffee and turpentine wrapping around me like an old quilt. There were maybe a dozen people already gathered, young, old, everything in between. The woman from the other day, the gallery owner, beamed when she spotted me. "Ellen, you made it." I smiled, a little shy but grateful. She introduced herself properly this time, Lydia Mercer, and handed me a canvas, a handful of battered brushes, and a tin palette smeared with a rainbow of colors. "No rules here," Lydia said warmly. "Just start." I found an easel by the window, the late morning light pouring over my shoulder, and stared at the blank canvas. It stared right back. My hand hovered for a moment, heart pounding louder than the chatter around me. And then, I dipped the brush into a soft green. The color spread across the white space, uneven and raw. I added a line of brown, a sweep of pale yellow, a splash of blue. Not thinking, not worrying, just breathing. The brush moved like it remembered something my mind had forgotten. Not perfection, not approval, just creation. Hours melted away. When Lydia finally called time, my back ached and my hands were smudged with paint, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I stepped back to look at what I'd made. It wasn't great, it wasn't polished, but it was mine. A crooked little porch swing under a lopsided oak tree, leaves swirling like golden confetti. Home! I pressed my palm lightly against the canvas, feeling the faint texture under my fingers. Healing didn't come in big sweeping gestures, I realized. It came in tiny brushstrokes, in quiet mornings and small choices, in claiming pieces of yourself you thought were too broken to bother with. After class, Lydia caught up with me at the coffee table, 2 steaming cups in hand. She handed me one. "You've got a good eye," she said casually, sipping hers. I chuckled. "Good eye, bad wrist," I said, flexing my cramped fingers. She laughed, her eyes crinkling. "Doesn't matter. You're painting. That's what counts." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep. We sat there a while, talking about art and Savannah, and life in general. Turns out Lydia had lived a few lives herself. Divorced young, started over twice, lost a brother she still spoke about in the present tense, like he might walk through the door any minute. "Grief doesn't end," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It just changes shape." I understood that now in a way I hadn't before. We weren't meant to stay the same. We were meant to be reshaped, rebroken, reborn 1,000 times before the end. If we were lucky. Over the next few weeks, I slipped into a rhythm. Mornings at the cafe down the block, coffee and crosswords and the low hum of strangers' conversations. Afternoons sketching in the squares, pigeons pecking at crumbs by my feet. Saturdays at the workshop, letting the colors stitch me back together, one messy stroke at a time. I ran into June again, too. She spotted me outside a bookstore one rainy afternoon, waving a bright red umbrella like a beacon. "Thought you might have slipped away on me," she teased, pulling me in for a warm, no-nonsense hug. We ended up sharing soup and cornbread at a little diner by the river, swapping stories about terrible dates and favorite old movies. It wasn't friendship born of desperation, like the ones you force just to fill the silence. It was easy, solid. We didn't need to fix each other. We just needed to witness each other. One night, curled up on the little love seat in my room, I pulled out my battered notebook. Ellen's new life list. It still said in big, clumsy letters. I flipped to the first page and smiled. 1. Go somewhere I've never been. 2. Take the train to Savannah. 3. Paint again, just for me. 4. Laugh until my sides hurt. Thanks to June and a disastrous attempt at a paddleboat tour that ended with us soaked and shrieking with laughter. The list was getting smaller, but my heart? It was getting bigger. That night, I slept with the window cracked open, the humid Savannah breeze carrying the scent of river water and night-blooming jasmine. And for the first time in years, my dreams weren't filled with regret, or anger, or empty spaces where love used to live. They were full of porch swings and wild paint colors, and the sound of my own laughter echoing through the wide-open night. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The knock came early one Thursday morning. I was on the balcony of my rented room, wrapped in a faded shawl, sipping coffee and watching the fog slink down the cobbled alley like it had somewhere to be. The sound startled me, not because it was loud, just unexpected. Nobody knocked on my door in Savannah. I hadn't told Greg where I was. Hadn't left forwarding information with anyone back home. I padded across the creaky floorboards and opened the door cautiously, half expecting it to be a delivery mistake. But it wasn't. It was Ashley. Hair in a sleek ponytail, lips painted soft pink, designer coat too heavy for the weather. But her eyes? Her eyes were hollow. Like someone had scooped the shine out of them and left the casing behind. "Ellen," she said. I didn't answer. Didn't move. She paused, cleared her throat. I know I shouldn't be here. But I didn't know where else to go. I stood still in the doorway, heart slow and solid. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. Ashley glanced down at her shoes, the same way a child does when caught lying. I just need 10 minutes, she whispered. "Please." And maybe I should have shut the door. Maybe I should have told her to take her 10 minutes and shove them straight into the past where they belonged. But I didn't. I stepped aside. She walked in, arms wrapped tight around her middle, like even her coat couldn't protect her from what she'd done. The room felt smaller with her in it. Not because she was loud. She wasn't. But because she carried so much undone behind those careful eyes. She sat on the edge of the armchair, like she was afraid it might bite. I stood across from her, arms folded. "Why are you here, Ashley?" She swallowed, fingers gripping the hem of her sleeve. "Greg told me you're not talking. That you won't take his calls anymore." I said nothing. She looked up at me then, and for once, there wasn't a trace of performance in her expression. Just exhaustion. "You were right," she said softly. Now that was something I never thought I'd hear pass her lips. She laughed, bitter and quiet. "My father pulled everything. The money, the trust, even the damn car lease. Said I'd embarrass the family. That I married beneath myself and made it worse." She looked away. He cut me off completely. I didn't respond. She kept going, words tumbling now like a dam had cracked. "We lost everything. The townhouse, the savings. Greg's job fell through. We're living in a one-bedroom behind a nail salon. And She paused, like she was choking on the truth. "I'm pregnant." I blinked, but didn't move. 6 months. She placed a hand over her belly then, so tentative, like she wasn't sure she deserved to touch the life inside her. "And I realized," she trailed off, voice cracking, "I've never said thank you for everything you gave us. And I sure as hell never said sorry." Still, I stayed silent. Because what do you say when the villain in your story suddenly starts to sound like someone else's victim? Ashley looked up, tears brimming. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," she said. "Not money, not help. I wanted to say that I see it now. What I did. What we did." She wiped her eyes and tried to smile, but it crumbled at the edges. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that you weren't crazy. You weren't overbearing. You were just good. And I was stupid enough to treat that like it was disposable." The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the bakery downstairs, starting its morning prep. I let the silence stretch, not to punish her, just to let the weight of her words settle in their proper place. Finally I spoke. "I gave up a lot for Greg," I said, not because I expected applause, but because I loved him. I still do, in a way. Ashley nodded, eyes red. "But love doesn't mean surrender. And I won't go back to being the silent woman in the corner of your perfect picture." She shook her head fiercely. "You won't be, I swear." I didn't smile, but I didn't scowl either. "You have a child coming," I said, "and that child deserves a better mother than you've been. So if you're serious about doing right this time, you'd better start by living different. Not just saying different." Ashley nodded again, clutching her coat like it might hold her together. She stood. I should go. I opened the door. She stepped outside, then paused. I don't know if Greg will ever get another chance with you, but I hope someday, maybe I can. I looked her dead in the eye. That depends on the kind of woman you decide to become, Ashley, not the one you pretend to be. And with that, I closed the door. Inside, I sat down on the edge of my bed, heart thudding steady in my chest, not angry, not sad, just clear. She came like a ghost in designer shoes, but this time, I didn't let her haunt me. I let her knock, but I didn't let her stay. The next morning, Savannah woke up draped in mist. The city looked half-dreamed, soft and blurred around the edges, like an old painting left too long in the rain. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders and sipped my coffee on the little balcony, thinking, not about Ashley, not about Greg, not even about the child they were bringing into the world. No, I was thinking about myself, about the life I'd started building here, brick by careful brick. It would have been easy to shut the door on them completely, lock it, board it up, throw away the key. God knows they deserved it after everything they'd done. But easy wasn't the same thing as right, and bitterness was a poison that didn't need any more room inside me. Still, forgiving them didn't mean forgetting. And it sure didn't mean inviting the hurt back in for coffee and pie. It meant setting boundaries so clear they might as well have been carved into stone. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a gift for them. It was a gift for me, a way to live lighter, to walk farther, to laugh without that heavy stone of resentment in my chest. I spent the rest of that day doing small, ordinary things. Grocery shopping, sketching by the river, picking up a new tube of cobalt blue paint at the art supply store. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was real. And real was more than enough. That Saturday at the art class, Lydia sidled up to me while I was fiddling with a rough little landscape. "You look lighter," she said, nudging my elbow. I smiled. "Feel lighter, too." "Good," she said simply. "You're carrying less of what doesn't belong to you anymore." I thought about that on the slow walk home, the thick Savannah air curling around my ankles. All my life, I'd carried things that weren't mine to hold. Other people's expectations, their disappointments, their endless need. No more. From now on, I was only carrying what fed me, what lifted me, what let me breathe easy. A week later, I got a small, square envelope in the mail. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a simple card. On the front, a tiny, hand-painted swing hanging from an oak tree. Inside, just one sentence. "Thank you for hearing me. I hope I can earn another chance." Signed simply, Ashley. No promises, no manipulations, just a quiet acknowledgement. I set the card on the little table by the window, weighed it down with a smooth river stone I'd picked up on a walk, and I left it there. Not to brood over, not to mourn over. Just there. A marker of where we had been, and maybe, where we might go. Someday, if they built it, brick by brick. That night, I pulled out my notebook again, the one with Ellen's new life list scrawled across the front in big block letters. I flipped to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "New Roots." Then underneath, I started a new list. 1. Find a little place of my own in Savannah. 2. Teach someone else how to paint without fear. 3. Plant a garden, even if it's just herbs on a windowsill. 4. Forgive, carefully, cautiously, but fully. 5. Love my life like it's the best thing I ever fought for. I tapped the pen against the paper, smiling. It wasn't about starting over anymore. It was about growing into myself, into this woman who had been there all along, just waiting for the noise and the grief and the obligations to fall away. I was finally getting to meet her. And I liked her. A lot. A few days later, while sketching in the park, June found me again. She plopped down on the bench beside me with a mischievous grin. "Heard through the grapevine you're looking for a place," she said, wiggling her eyebrows. I laughed. "You spying on me now?" She shrugged, mock innocent. "Small town, big mouths. She pulled a crumpled flyer from her tote bag and smoothed it on my lap. "Landlady's a friend of mine," June said. "Little cottage a few blocks from here. Needs some love. But the bones are good." I studied the flyer. A tiny white clapboard house with blue shutters, a crooked fence, and a swing hanging lopsided from an old oak in the front yard. I felt it in my chest. That quiet yes. Not flashy. Not perfect. But solid. Mine. I looked over at June, tears prickling hot behind my eyes. "You think it's crazy?" I whispered. She smiled, wide and sure. "I think it's perfect." And just like that, I knew. Savannah wasn't just a place I visited. It was home now. My second act. My quiet triumph. My fresh start. Built not on what I lost, but on everything I found when I finally let go.